For a long time, we've been told that if we can't focus on one thing, we're scattered, that we lack discipline. And maybe, at some point, you started believing that about yourself. But what if that story isn't true? If you've ever felt frustrated for having too many interests, switching directions, or never quite fitting into one box, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not broken. What feels like inconsistency may actually be cognitive flexibility. A brain wired to connect ideas across fields, recognize patterns quickly, and adapt to complexity. You're not scattered. You might be built for a different kind of future. If this resonates with you, feel free to like and subscribe to Sidewave so we can continue exploring how your mind really works. Now, let's break down the psychological patterns behind M-shaped thinkers and why this could be your hidden advantage. If you often move from one interest to another, if your curiosity shifts before other people expect it to, you may have been told that you're scattered. Maybe you've even told yourself that. But let's slow this down and look at it more carefully. There's a pattern here, and it's worth understanding. First, the tendency to switch interests. You might begin something with real intensity. You dive in. You learn quickly. You connect ideas. For a while, you're fully engaged. And then, gradually, something changes. The excitement fades. Your attention drifts towards something new. From the outside, this can look like inconsistency. But psychologically, people who score high in openness to experience are highly responsive to novelty and complexity. Their dopamine systems are particularly sensitive to learning and discovery. When a task becomes predictable, the brain's stimulation drops. Not because the person lacks discipline, but because their nervous system is calibrated for exploration and growth. In that light, what looks like quitting may actually be rapid acquisition, followed by a natural search for the next layer of challenge. That is not scattered thinking. It is a mind designed to expand. Second, the difficulty of defining yourself with one title. When someone asks, "What do you do?" you hesitate. Not because you don't do anything, but because one label feels incomplete. You may have depth in more than one area, or you may think across categories rather than within them. Neurologically, some people process the world through integrative networks. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and synthesis, doesn't isolate domains. It links them. Identity becomes layered rather than singular. Instead of building one vertical column, the mind builds multiple pillars and connects them. In a world that used to reward single-track specialization, that can feel confusing. But in an M-shaped future, where depth exists in multiple domains and value comes from integration, that layered identity is not instability. It's structural flexibility. Third, the habit of connecting ideas that seem unrelated. You might notice patterns between psychology and business, between art and technology, between storytelling and strategy. Other people may not immediately see the link, but to you, the connection feels obvious. The brain works through associative networks. The more diverse your inputs, the more cross-activation occurs between different neural pathways. When two distant concepts fire at the same time, new insight emerges. This is the basis of interdisciplinary creativity. It doesn't look linear. It doesn't look tidy. But it produces synthesis, and synthesis is increasingly valuable in complex systems. So when your mind jumps across domains, it may not be drifting. It may be mapping. Fourth, the discomfort with linear career paths. You may struggle to picture yourself doing one thing for 30 years. The traditional model, study, specialize, climb, can feel tight, almost suffocating. This doesn't necessarily mean you lack commitment. Some individuals are strongly driven by intrinsic motivation. They are energized by curiosity, meaning, and internal growth, rather than by external structure. When placed in rigid systems, their motivational circuits quiet down. Stagnation sets in, not because they are incapable, but because their psychological needs aren't being met. Nonlinearity, for them, is not chaos. It is alignment. In an M-shaped framework, Careers resemble networks rather than ladders. Multiple depths, multiple axes, movement between them. For a nonlinear mind, that isn't instability. It's coherence expressed differently. Fifth, being labeled as unfocused. If you manage multiple interests at once, it can look like divided attention. You might be told you're spreading yourself too thin. But there is an important distinction between distractibility and executive flexibility. Distractibility is a loss of control over attention. Executive flexibility, on the other hand, is the ability to shift between mental frameworks while retaining prior knowledge. It's controlled switching, not random drifting. Some brains are particularly good at holding multiple streams of thought in parallel. They zoom out easily. They see systems rather than fragments. In simple environments, narrow focus wins. In complex environments, systems thinking wins. The M-shaped future, shaped by rapid change, hybrid industries, and AI integration, rewards those who can navigate complexity without losing structure. That may be what you've been doing all along. Sixth, the persistent drive to grow, even when things are stable. Even when life looks fine on the surface, you may feel an internal pull towards something new, a skill to develop, a field to explore, a direction to test. This can be misunderstood as dissatisfaction. But for growth-oriented individuals, the brain's reward system responds more strongly to progress than to maintenance. Stability alone does not generate fulfillment. Expansion does. This orientation toward learning is not restlessness. It is developmental momentum. In uncertain futures, the people who continue learning, not out of fear, but out of curiosity, are the ones who remain adaptive. Finally, the feeling of being different in specialized environments. You may look at people who dedicate themselves to one narrow expertise and wonder if something is missing in you. But specialization and integration are simply two different cognitive strategies. Some minds optimize for depth along one axis. Others optimize for depth across several axes, with connective tissue between them. Both are valid. Both are necessary. In ecological systems, diversity increases resilience. The same principle applies to cognitive ecosystems. A world built only on specialists becomes fragile. A world that includes integrators becomes adaptive. If you have always felt slightly out of place in highly specialized structures, it may not be because you lack focus. It may be because your architecture is different. Not scattered, layered, not inconsistent, integrative, not unfocused, designed for complexity. And complexity is exactly what the M-shaped future is built on. You were never scattered. You were adapting to a world that is more layered than linear. What looked like inconsistency was depth forming in multiple directions. What felt like restlessness was your mind learning how to integrate. There is nothing broken here. You are not alone in this. You simply operate differently, and that difference carries strength. In the next video, we'll look at another hidden pattern. What happens when a child grows up without love, and how that shapes a life quietly over time. If this space feels steady for you, stay with Psywave.